Hi, my name is Lena. I'm in my early 30s now, and I've lived through some of the happiest and most painful moments of my life. But today, I want to tell you about the time when everything seemed perfect, and I thought nothing could ever go wrong. It all started with Max. I met him when I was just starting college. I was working part-time at a little coffee shop in the heart of the city, and he came in almost every morning for his coffee. At first he was just another regular, a quiet man in his late 20s who didn't say much. But there was something about him, something calm and steady. Every time he walked in, I couldn't help but notice how kind his eyes were, and how easy it was to talk to him. One day, after serving him his usual black coffee, he smiled at me and said, "I'm Max, by the way. You always make the best coffee." I didn't think much of it at first, but then he started coming in more often, and we started talking a little longer each time. At first it was just casual small talk about the weather or how busy the coffee shop was. But soon we started talking about our lives. He told me about his job as a carpenter, how he loved working with his hands, and how his small workshop was just outside the city. I shared with him how I was juggling work and college, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Max was a good listener. There was no judgment in his voice, no rush to get to the next thing. He made me feel like everything I said mattered. After a few months of these daily chats, I found myself looking forward to his visits. He would always ask about my day, and we'd share stories about the things that mattered most. He was funny, thoughtful, and seemed to have a way of making everything feel just a little bit brighter. One afternoon, after he had ordered his coffee, Max said, "You know, you're pretty easy to talk to. How about we grab a coffee together sometime? I'm not asking you to leave work, just a casual coffee, no strings attached." I hesitated, but something inside me told me this was different. So I said yes. That was the start of something beautiful. We went on our first date the next weekend, and it was perfect. We talked for hours about everything, life, dreams, family, and the way he looked at me made me feel special. He wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. I felt safe with him, and that night, I knew I wanted to see him again. Before long, Max and I were inseparable. He became my best friend, my partner, my everything. We spent the next few years building a life together, one that felt easy and full of love. We moved into a cozy little house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like home. It had a small garden with flowers Max had planted, a big oak tree in the backyard that we sat under during warm summer nights, and windows that let in the most beautiful sunlight. And then we had our first child, Lucas. He was everything we had dreamed of. Max was an amazing father. He would play with Lucas, tell him stories, and hold him in his arms like he was the most precious thing in the world. Soon after Lucas, Mia came into our lives, and our family felt complete. Life was good. No, it was perfect. I had the man I loved, 2 beautiful children, and a home filled with happiness. I had no idea that life, as I knew it, was about to change forever. It was a beautiful spring day when everything began to change. The kind of day where the sky is clear, the air smells fresh, and the world feels like it's just waiting for something good to happen. I was sitting in our kitchen, sipping on my coffee while Lucas and Mia played in the backyard. Max had just come home from work, his usual smile on his face. "I've got some exciting news," he said as he kissed me on the cheek. "I'm getting a big project. It's a new house and the design is amazing. It's going to keep me busy for a while, but it'll pay really well. We could use the extra money for a vacation this summer, maybe somewhere warm." I smiled and gave him a hug. "That sounds perfect. You deserve it." At that moment I felt like we were untouchable, like nothing could shake us. Max had always been a hard worker, but this project seemed like it was going to be something big, something that could change everything for us. And for a few weeks, things went exactly as planned. Max worked late nights, sometimes not getting home until after the kids were in bed. But we made it work. I handled the kids, the house, and everything else, and Max did what he did best, building things that would last. But then, one evening, something happened that I could never have expected. Max came home looking different. Max gave me a half smile and shrugged. "It's nothing, just a little headache, it'll pass." But it didn't pass. In the days that followed, Max became more tired, more distant. He would sit on the couch after work, barely able to keep his eyes open. I tried to convince him to go to the doctor, but he insisted it was just stress from the project. "I'll be fine," he said. "I just need a little rest." But rest didn't make a difference. One night, after a long day, Max collapsed in the living room, clutching his chest. His face was twisted in pain, his breath shallow and rapid. My heart stopped. I screamed for help, but I already knew. I could feel it deep inside me. Something was terribly wrong. I called 911, but by the time the ambulance arrived, Max was gone. Just like that, my world crumbled. One moment I was holding his hand, begging him to be okay, and the next, he was gone. There were no words, no explanation, nothing to make sense of it. I remember staring at his lifeless body, the person who had been my everything, the father of my children, and thinking, how could this happen? How could the man I loved, the man I thought would be with me forever, be taken away so suddenly? The days that followed were a blur, the funeral, the endless stream of condolences. But none of it mattered. I couldn't stop the pain. It felt like I was walking through life in a fog, everything around me just a haze of noise and emptiness. Lucas and Mia were heartbroken. They didn't understand. They were too young to grasp the finality of it, and that broke me even more. For months I stayed in bed, unable to do anything. Every time I looked at the kids, I saw Max. Every time I tried to get out of bed, I felt his absence. I felt lost, like I was floating without direction. How could I move on when the love of my life was gone? How could I keep going for the kids when I felt like I had nothing left to give? But then, one day, something changed. I was sitting in the kitchen again, the place where we used to talk, laugh, and plan our future. Lucas came up to me and said, "Mom, please don't leave us too." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized then that I couldn't just give up. I couldn't stay stuck in the past forever. Max would want me to be strong. He would want me to keep going for the kids. And so I did. The months after Max's death felt like a long, slow climb. There were days when I didn't know how I would make it through. The house that once felt full of laughter and love now felt empty, like the walls themselves were mourning. I would wake up every morning to the sound of the kids calling out to me, and for a while I didn't know how to respond. How could I be the mom they needed when I felt like I couldn't even get out of bed? But then there was Lucas and Mia. They needed me. They were hurting too, but in a way, they were also teaching me how to keep going. Lucas would come to me with his little drawings, showing me pictures of our family, asking why Daddy couldn't be there to see them. Mia, always so quiet, would climb into my lap at night and ask me to read her bedtime stories, the same ones Max used to read. I couldn't let them see me fall apart completely. One evening, about 6 months after Max's passing, I was sitting on the porch, watching the kids play in the yard. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over everything, and I felt a strange calm. The air was cool, and the rustling of the leaves sounded peaceful. I closed my eyes and let the quiet wash over me, and for the first time in months I realized something. I had to live. I couldn't let my grief define me forever. I couldn't let Max's death steal my joy and my future. I made a decision that night. I would start living again, not for myself alone, but for my children. They deserved a mother who was present, who could help them grow, who could smile again. And so, little by little, I began to piece my life back together. The first step was getting back to work. It was tough at first. I felt out of place at the coffee shop, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. But as I started talking to the regulars again, I found a sense of purpose. The daily rhythm of work, the simple tasks of making coffee and chatting with customers, gave me a small anchor in a world that felt so unsteady. Then, one day, I found myself thinking about something I hadn't in a long time, what made me happy. I had spent so many years focusing on my family, on Max, on our life together, that I had forgotten what it felt like to take care of myself. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in forever. I joined a local painting class to learn something new, just for the fun of it. It was amazing how much the small things began to fill the hole that had been left by Max's absence. But something else was changing too. I found myself thinking about the future, not in the way I used to with Max by my side, but in a new way. Could I open my heart again? Could I ever let someone else in? I wasn't sure. But life had a way of surprising me. One afternoon, while I was running errands, I bumped into Sarah. She was an old acquaintance from the community centre where I had volunteered years ago. She had always been kind, and we exchanged pleasantries. After a few minutes of chatting, she mentioned something that made my heart skip a beat. "You know," she said, "I've got this brother, Alex. He's been bugging me to introduce him to you. He's always saying, 'I think Lena's someone I'd like to meet.'" I was caught off guard. My heart raced, not because I was ready to meet someone new, but because it felt so unexpected. Alex? I hadn't even thought about dating or anything like that since Max. But Sarah's words lingered in my mind long after we parted ways. Maybe it was time to let someone new into my life. Maybe, just maybe, I could take a small step toward moving forward. But would it feel like betrayal to Max? Would it be unfair to the children? It was strange, really, how life could shift so suddenly. One moment, I was simply trying to get through each day, keeping things together for Lucas and Mia. And the next, I was wondering whether I could possibly open my heart again. I thought I had all the time in the world to figure that out, but life didn't wait. After meeting Sarah and hearing about her brother Alex, I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility. I tried to push the thought out of my mind. After all, it had only been a little over a year since Max passed away. But I couldn't ignore the small curiosity that had crept in. Was it wrong to think about someone else? Was I betraying Max by even considering it? It was a battle inside my head every day. But then one Saturday, Sarah invited me over for a coffee at her house. She insisted it would just be a casual hangout, and she wanted me to meet Alex. I hesitated at first. The thought of meeting a man, especially someone who had already shown interest in me, felt overwhelming. But after a long talk with myself, I decided to go. I needed to face my fears, whatever they were. When I arrived at Sarah's house, I was greeted with warmth. Her home was cozy with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh-baked cookies in the air. Sarah's laughter was infectious, and it put me at ease. But the moment Alex walked into the room, my breath caught. He was taller than I expected, with messy brown hair and a smile that made my heart skip a beat. His eyes were kind, and there was an honesty about him that made me feel strangely comfortable. "Lena, it's nice to finally meet you," Alex said with a soft smile. His voice was calm, but there was something about it that made me feel like he was genuinely happy to see me. I smiled back, though I felt a bit nervous. "Nice to meet you too." The evening started off slowly. We sat around the table, sharing stories about Sarah's latest adventures with her garden and laughing at the ridiculous things Lucas and Mia had been doing lately. Slowly I began to relax. Alex didn't rush me, didn't make me feel uncomfortable. We talked about simple things at first, books, movies, our favourite places in town. And little by little I started to see that he wasn't just some guy. He was kind, genuinely kind. There was no pressure, no awkwardness. At one point Sarah stepped out to grab something from the kitchen, leaving Alex and me alone. For a moment there was silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Alex looked at me, his blue eyes serious yet warm. "I know this might be a bit much," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I'm not rushing you into anything. I just want to be here for you." I felt a lump in my throat. How could someone be so patient, so understanding when I wasn't even sure what I needed myself? It was overwhelming in a way, but there was something so genuine in his words, something so simple, that I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. I took a deep breath. "Thank you," I said, my voice a little shaky. "I didn't expect to feel so comfortable talking to you, but I do. I don't know what it means yet, but I'm glad you're here." Alex smiled, and it was a smile full of understanding, not judgment, as if he knew this wasn't going to be easy, but it felt like the first step towards something new, something that might not be like what I had with Max, but still something worth exploring. The night ended with hugs all around, and I left Sarah's house feeling a mix of emotions. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of possibility. Maybe life wasn't over for me. Maybe, just maybe, it was beginning again. The next few weeks felt like they passed in a blur. I'd find myself thinking about Alex more often than I expected, and it wasn't just because of how he looked. There was something about his presence that made me feel at ease, something that made me think maybe, just maybe, I could open up to him. But the guilt lingered. It wasn't easy to quiet the voice inside me that reminded me of Max, that told me I should never move on. But every time I saw Alex's smile, heard his gentle voice, I felt a little lighter. Sarah kept encouraging me to give it time. "You're not betraying Max, Lena," she said one evening while we were having coffee. "He'd want you to be happy again." Her words stuck with me. Deep down, I knew she was right. Max wouldn't have wanted me to live in the shadow of the past forever. He had always wanted the best for me, for Lucas and Mia. If there was any chance I could find happiness again, even if it looked different from what I had before, I had to take it. Still, there was a part of me that hesitated. Was I ready for this? To bring someone new into my life, into my children's lives? Would they be okay with it? Would they accept Alex? And what if it didn't work out? What if it was just another heartbreak? One evening, as I was tucking Lucas and Mia into bed, Lucas asked, "Mom, is Alex going to be our new dad?" I froze for a moment. I hadn't expected him to ask something like that. My heart pounded in my chest. The idea of Alex taking Max's place, of my children seeing him as their father, it was a thought that hit me harder than I'd anticipated. "No, sweetie," I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Alex is a friend, he's very nice and we like him, but nobody can replace your dad." I froze for a moment. I hadn't expected him to ask something like that. Lucas nodded, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. He was still processing everything, just like me. The next time I saw Alex, I knew it was time to have the conversation. "Alex," I said, looking at him carefully, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what this could mean. I need you to know that I can't just jump into anything. It's not that I don't want to, but I have my children to think about. They need time to adjust." Alex listened quietly, and when I was finished, he nodded. "I understand, Lena. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, and I'm here for them, whenever they're ready." His patience made me breathe easier. It wasn't about rushing things or forcing something that wasn't meant to be. Alex wasn't looking to take over my life. He just wanted to be a part of it, slowly, naturally. And maybe, just maybe, that was what I needed. Over the next few months, we continued to spend time together, letting things develop at their own pace. Alex would come over for dinner sometimes, or we'd take the kids to the park. Mia and Lucas began to like him more with each visit. He was fun, but also respectful of their boundaries. He didn't try to step into a fatherly role, but he was a good influence, supportive, encouraging, and patient. And then, one day, it happened. We were at the park, the kids running ahead, laughing as they played. Alex and I were sitting on the bench, just watching them. He turned to me with a soft smile, and for the first time, I realized how much I cared for him. It wasn't just about having someone there. It was about trusting him, about feeling like maybe I had something to look forward to. "I'm glad we did this," I said, my voice quiet. Alex took my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Me too." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of the past on my shoulders. I didn't feel like I was betraying Max. I was learning how to live again, how to be open to new experiences, new relationships. It wasn't going to be perfect, and I didn't expect it to be, but maybe that was okay. Life wasn't about perfection. It was about taking the next step, however small, and trusting that it would lead you somewhere good. With Alex by my side, and with Lucas and Mia learning to accept him as part of our lives, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The future, once so uncertain, suddenly didn't seem so scary. And as we walked home that evening, hand in hand, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with an open heart. I had made it through the hardest parts of my life, and I was still here. That, in itself, felt like a victory.